And we're live. There we go. Welcome back, Citonauts. Buenos dias for everybody. This is a very exciting episode today because I will have a special guest from another ecosystem. Usually we talk a lot about Cosmos here, but today I have Ilya on the show. And before I introduce him, three things. Number one, like this video, share it on social media, on Twitter, on Telegram groups to make sure people can join. Number two, also drop questions throughout the stream because I'll pick that up later. Towards the end, we have a little Q&A. And third, talk to each other nice. I know we're still in a little bear market, but yeah, just treat each other nice. And yeah, I will introduce you my guest before I bring him on. My guest is Ilya. Ilya is a former systems engineer at Google with more than 10 years of experience in machine learning. He then went on to co-found Near protocol in mid-2018 and now leads the engineering and the technical development with a main vision to focus on user experience and making it very simple for developers and builders to build applications. Also, Near is the first public blockchain to implement sharding, which we're going to learn about. That is a scalability solution. Near currently has a market valuation of $2.5 billion US, with a TVL of nearly 100 million and over 20 million active unique accounts. Ilya, thank you so much for being here. And congratulations, first of all, to that success story of Near.
Thanks, Michael. Great to be here.
Nice. And I already mentioned it. You used to work at Google. You have a strong background also in machine learning, which we might pick your brain later about sort of the blockchain XAI narrative. But I wanted to start off just asking you, how is it compared, to work at Google, this traditional kind of like world, versus being a Web3 founder? And do you ever regret having gone full-time into crypto?
Well, I totally not regret. But yeah, it's an interesting comparison because Google is also not your usual company, and it's actually very decentralized itself in many ways. There's a lot of teams working on overlapping things. There's like all the source code inside Google is kind of open to everyone to use and build on. But at the same time, it's still kind of it's like a closed system, right? So you're kind of still working within that environment. And actually, like the way I think of building Web3 is actually building something like Google but in an open way, right? How do we encourage like everybody's using everybody's stuff, right? You have open services, you have kind of common infrastructure, you have common identity, right? And at the same time, people are able to innovate and come in and come out kind of freely and permissionlessly and launch new products, importantly. And so I do think kind of the combination of the like Google built a pretty strong kind of innovative culture early on, but then, created this like, you need to join this, you need to pass interview, and only then you can do stuff. And it kind of created isolation in a way, at least from my perspective, versus we trying to create like this open ecosystem where anybody can come build a piece of the ecosystem and be successful doing that. And so, yeah, so I take the lessons, rework this for the Web3 and, apply it. But in general, I think the speed of innovation in Web3 is insane, right? Like people, just because you have so much ability to just like, hey, I'll take this 5 things, mix them up, right? And launch a new thing. And like, I can do it in a weekend and it's in front of users and people can start trying using it, right? And like, I think that kind of power is really insane. And that's what I was excited about open source, when I was just starting, and kind of that's what got me excited about Web3 is this composability and ability to like really move quickly and get something exciting out.
Yeah, I feel like the only downside, at least for me, being in the crypto space full time, is like the fact that it's 24/7, right? This meme that blockchain never sleeps is like, there's literally every day there's some drama, there's something going on, there's some exploit, there's a hack, FTX, Do Kwon, right? The whole UST thing, a governance proposal that's weird, right? Like there's always something. Like how do you deal with that? Like do you feel that's a different level of also stress? And I guess as a founder, you also have a massive amount of pressure on your shoulders. Like how do you deal with that?
Well, I'm generally like, know how to manage stress pretty well. But I think it's important to focus on long term. Like we started with long term vision, and like we continue focusing on long term. If you get like rallied up into like a short term, this new hype thing that's going on, right? Like, oh, people doing this weird derivative and it's hyped up and everybody's pulling money into it and discussing it. If you keep doing that, then you're going to be like out of energy really quickly, right? But if you're like, hey, our long-term vision is this, right? This is how we see the world, in 5-10 years, and we continue building with it. And like, okay, what are the pieces we need now to make us to the next step? Well, it's like, we need financial components, we need, governance components, we need, scalability, we need better user experience. Okay, cool. We have this, we have them used. Okay, what's the next block? And so it kind of be like a lot more methodical. Similar, like, with exchanges, like, okay, well, obviously centralized exchanges doesn't work, right? Like, we know that it's not the news that a centralized exchange stole money. Like, that's like not a new thing for past, I don't know, 7-8 years, right? So like that's something to fix. And so like, for example, we have Orderly project, which is exactly like a centralized exchange experience, but fully decentralized custody and settlement, immediate. Right? So stuff like this, you're gonna like, okay, well, here's the problem. It's a fundamental problem of the space. Okay, let's fix this. Let's build a product that is actually as good or better than centralized exchange and do this. Okay, what are the problems? Okay, well, lending, right? Like, okay, let's address that. And you just like knock them out one by one and actually like build up this foundation. And that's kind of how we approach and like in ecosystem building as well. Like real use case, real thing, and then just like not try to run around and kind of react to every drama and every discussion and hype. Yeah.
And talking about getting to the next level, I think that has also been your motivation since you joined the crypto space and came up with the idea also to build a next generation of Web3 platform. I think it was Vitalik who coined that term, the blockchain trilemma, which is basically scalability, security, and decentralization, pick two. How does Near resolve that? And maybe how would you describe, like, what's the secret sauce or like the killer feature that Near has as opposed to other existing L1s out there?
For sure, yeah. Well, I think kind of our killer feature is actually not in the decentralization trilemma. It's in the fact that we're just focused on building this really usable experience for users and developers, but we can talk about it in a second. But if we're going to the decentralization trilemma, so again, because we focus on usability, right? Everything is driven from that, and so usability means that when this is successful, right? When we have billions of users, it should not become unusable and like super expensive to transact, right? So which means it needs to scale to, let's say, 1 billion users. Okay, so how to scale to 1 billion users? Well, you cannot put it all in one machine, right? There's no way one computer, like however powerful it is, will be able to process 1 billion user worth of transactions and store all of their data. Okay, so you need multiple machines splitting the work, doing stuff in parallel. Well, so everybody's doing this, right? So Cosmos zones are, splitting work and doing it in parallel. Polkadot parachains, layer 2s, subnets, etc. Right? Everybody calls them different names. Now, again, from now we go back to the principle, usability. Okay, is zones, parachains, at layer 2s are usable? And the answer is actually no, because they are separate entities, right? You need to have separate balances. You need to have like separate fees. You need to do all this. And like all of this is like will be fixed at some point, right? Like everybody's working on making this easier. But generally speaking, this approach is complex. And we can talk about the security parts, right? Users understanding and how this can be addressed as well. But from kind of where we were coming, right, in this 2018, it's like, how do we build something that looks like a single blockchain for the user, but is indeed scalable and continue growing in capacity when there's more users. Mm-hmm. And so the approach we're taking is called Nightshade, is when we're sharding blocks. So imagine you have one blockchain, but the block itself is actually split into pieces, and each piece, we call them chunks, is executed by different, set of validators. And so this allows to, like, as more demand needed for block space, to actually add more validators to the network. So actually network becomes more and more decentralized the more usage this network has. And so in a way, this is kind of in this trilemma, what we focus on is kind of ability to scale the capacity with more demand, which in turn means we're going to have more validators who are going to be participating in the consensus. And at the same time, the more validators, actually the more secure the network becomes, because you actually have like we have data availability embedded directly into consensus. So like the more validators there, that like the harder it is to attack the system, because like you need to affect more validators and like to take over any of the parts of the system. And so interestingly, the idea here is like as network grows, there's more usage, like there's more value in securing it, meaning that, and then leads to more decentralized and secure network as well. And that's kind of how we think about it, is like focus on usability and then make it, as it scales, more and more secure and decentralized.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about decentralization, I think there's like so many layers, right? There are also like social layers that you also can't really measure. But I think the most common one that people take and also like put into a number is the Nakamoto coefficient, right? According, like the only site I know where you can see that is called nakaflow.io. I don't know if you know that site. And Near has a coefficient of 8 here, which means basically 8 validators would be able to kind of like run the network. Is that accurate? Like, or is that there a different way to kind of like measure that? And also in that context, maybe you can explain what are some of the entry barriers for validators?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So there is few things, right? What is a number that can stop the network, right? So this is indeed, I guess it went down because it was more, but this is like how many validators have 33% of stake. So indeed this is 8 right now.
And just, I think also to like put this into context, according to the same site, Ethereum is currently at 2. So
yeah.
Cosmos is also at 8, by the way.
Yeah, Polygon is at 4. Yeah,
the Cosmos hub. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, like, because it's a permissionless system and people for some reason prefer to delegate to top validators, the top validators keep amassing more and more stake, right? And like I always ask everybody, delegate lower or use like liquid staking that actually distributes the delegation. But yeah, there's definitely a preference of higher validators, which actually leads to a less stable network. So please, everybody's watching who is staking on Near, delegate down. Yeah, so kind of few things, right? So the Near right now is actually at 206 validators, like validating nodes, and actually the number of slots available is 300. So we actually went from 100 slots to 300 slots last September when we launched chunk-only producers. And so this is where we kind of launched this, where the more shards network has, the more like validators pretty much is needed on the network. And so this is like right now it's like there's 100 block producers and then 50 per shard with 4 shards, total 300 right now. And so as the network needs more capacity, there will be more slots actually to fill. And so with that, the current seed price, right, the current like limit to become a validator is 25,000 Near. So whatever multiplied by the price. And so that gets you into the slot. And the cool thing is there's liquid staking providers who are actually helping people to get into this. And there's actually like liquid staking governance where people get upvoted to get more stake from this. So you can actually get started, if you start participating in the ecosystem and get some attention from either liquid stakers or the governance holders of liquid staking, which is the community.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that later also. I think there's a project called MetaPool that does exactly that, right? So they have basically, so how does that exactly work? Liquid staking and governance, decentralization, like how does that work?
Yeah, so liquid staking is pretty much a protocol on top. So the cool thing about Near, the staking itself is done by smart contracts. So when and you actually can customize what smart contract like you run as a validator. So there's right now 2 main options. Like one is like basic, which we launched with, and there's like one which is more advanced, which allows actually, if you're a project, you can actually distribute your token and in turn get the rewards back. So it's like actually a form of crowdfunding as well. And so Metapool is actually, it's the same format contract, but when you deposit Near, kind of stake Near with it, it distributes this Near between a number of other validators. So it kind of serves as a proxy. And it gives you a new token called ST Near that is, actually increases in value over time as rewards are accrued. And so you can then use this ST Near in lending, for example, and borrow against it, or you can, use it somewhere else. And then, so they have their Meta token that they use to decide which validators to distribute how much of the Near that being staked with them. And so that allows to kind of, let's say you're a new validator, you don't have enough Near, you can like, hey, get some Metapool holders to pretty much vote for you, and then Metapool smart contract will delegate to you through that process. And so this is fully on chain, and obviously there's, some social communication around that, but like the voting and distribution all happens on chain.
I also wanted to ask you about your thoughts on liquid staking in general, because I don't know if you followed the Atom 2.0 debates, right? That was like a white paper proposed by some core developers. One element of that paper was liquid staking, to basically embed that directly on the Cosmos Hub. And there are some people that said, hey, the end game for every crypto asset eventually is that it will all be 100% liquid staked assets, so that you have a staked ratio of 100%, which enhances the security. And others that say this poses a giant systemic risk for the entire platform, right? So what are your thoughts on that? And like, how do you view the kind of like ideal end game for liquid staking or staking derivatives?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. So and like a lot of it was actually when we were starting, I was talking with Zaki. So
shout out to Zaki. He's the man.
And so like actually a lot of our staking design was influenced by conversations with him. And like I wouldn't expect 100% stake ratio. That's like for many different reasons. I think liquid staking does have some non-zero risk that is added, and so there will be kind of additional thing. Near actually has 3 different liquid staking providers, so Metapool, Linear, and Stater. And so like having multiple providers is always good for competition. And so I think that's partially why I wouldn't expect like there will be just like 100%, because people will be moving between and kind of choosing, and there will be like some unstaked amount to balance, etc. There is some, again, there's risks around this option, and so like I'm sure also some people will just not take this and will be staking directly, and then some people will just use Near in DeFi and in transactions and other useful usage, right? But I do think it's a very useful primitive that unlocks like liquidity in the ecosystem, as well as kind of opens up other interesting use cases, which, if we talk about like, security mesh and eigenlayer, like approaches like that are really interesting as well, creating new opportunities. And it's like kind of it's a primitive that allows you to build stuff on top.
Yeah, and one thing, as I was preparing for this, I watched some of your presentations you gave over the past years, and I really liked your vision, basically to say, hey, crypto needs to be very simple, right? Especially for developers, but also it needs to be intuitive and easy to use for end users. But let's start maybe with developers. As far as I understand, I think on Near you can deploy smart contracts on Rust, also on JavaScript now, and I think also via Aurora, I think it's called, in Solidity. So maybe talk about, if I was a developer, why would I build on Near, and what benefits would I have compared to other ecosystems?
For sure, yeah. So I think it starts with this idea that Near is built with like user experience in mind, right? So our account model is designed to kind of provide lots of different optionality for developers and users how they manage their accounts. And so to just name a few, so your account is named, right? So mine, for example, is ilya.near. It has lots of different keys with different permissions, which allows to do different things like have, well, recovery, right? You can have multiple recovery options. You can, if you think that your key has been compromised, instead of needing to drain the account and then hope you don't have anything locked, you can just rotate the keys on the same account, right? You just change the keys. But also it allows you to, when you log in into application, you can authorize the front end of application for specific permissions with a separate key. So you can have, like, let's say a game where you're playing the game and it sends transactions and you don't need to go to wallet every time, right? So you can build experiences like this. And that's very powerful. And there's actually like more and more experiences being built. We have a really cool project called KeyPalm, which creates kind of a temporary keys, which like serve as guest accounts. And you can send this guest account to somebody. They can do a bunch of stuff. Like, for example, it has a ticket on it. You can, get into the venue. It actually records a pull-up for you. And then later you convert it into a real account. So you can create like this, and like all of this is prepaid by the whoever sent you the key. So
I think you did that at NearCon, right? Because I was at
Yeah.
NearCon last year, and I picked up some Near that I got there for free. So, and I think that's how it worked, right? I don't recall correctly, but I think.
Yeah, exactly. So you can
Very
send link. You can send a link with some Near or even an NFT, and you can like when you click the link, you create an account and you get an NFT in your wallet. And so and like there's, again, I'm just saying, like, there's more and more use cases being built around this kind of like tool, right? And so that's kind of the general gist, is like you can build really interesting onboarding experiences. And we're actually launching more stuff. So we're launching meta transactions on the protocol, so the developer can pay for user transactions, or user can pay with like other tokens like stable coins or whatever, while transacting through this process. We actually fixed, like, you can create accounts easier, and then we're also adding more like biometric onboarding, pretty much, so you don't need to like create seed phrases and stuff like this. So we're kind of really focusing on like how to make onboarding and user experience, especially when they don't have yet assets, extremely simple. And so that is like a really unlocking feature for many developers, because they have a trouble just onboarding users. Like, everybody is, if you think like people landing on their website to actually use their app, like the drop off there is like 90-something%. And so like, how do we reduce that drop off? How do we make it easier? And kind of building other pieces around that as well. The second part is, it is developer experience, right? So Near has like, one of the, outside of EVM, probably the biggest kind of available developer tooling setup, right? Again, you can write in Rust, which is really good. Recommend to everyone. You can JavaScript, you can write smart contracts in that. You can also write Rust smart contracts with JavaScript modules. So you can like customize your Rust smart contract with JavaScript modules to extend it. You can, like, there's a lot of developer tooling, data platform, to query data extremely easily, indexers, like there's a lake to access all of the on-chain data really quickly. Like, there's just lots and lots of tooling on kind of different aspects. And Aurora is providing this, kind of, and so Aurora is a really good example of how powerful Near is, because Aurora is taking EVM code, right? The EVM code that was originally built actually for Ethereum, and ran it as smart contract. So you can take existing code base, right, that was not designed for blockchain, and run it as a smart contract on Near. And so that just shows you how powerful this is. And then you build some tooling around that to simulate it as a network. And so that's what Aurora is. Aurora is literally a smart contract on Near, like a one contract on Near that inside has, your EVM bytecode contracts, and looks like a chain, but it's still a contract, and you can actually access it from other contracts. And so, and you can call out inside. And so that's just example of like the power of, like, you can run other blockchains on Near pretty much as smart contracts.
I always thought it's somehow like a side chain or some sort of subnet equivalent. But yeah, interesting. Okay.
And then the other thing for all the Cosmos fans, on Near, so on Near is sharded, right? So there's lots of shards, and shards are actually Dynamic, although right now it's still done by validator governance, decided which shard is doing like what subset of work. But like from perspective of execution, shards are all look exactly the same. But for example, for something like Aurora, because it has a lot of usage, the governance decided to pull it out into a separate shard. So it has a dedicated shard of capacity for Aurora. So this is literally how AppChain, like if you get an AppChain, EVM AppChain of capacity, but you didn't need to think about validators. You didn't need to think about infrastructure, data like feeds, explorers, like none of that, right? You just say like, hey, my app is big enough to need a shard, and you got a shard, right? But like if you don't need it, you just run as an app kind of inside shared shards. And like the idea is later to have this dynamically like protocol decided, not through governance. So like we're working toward that, but it's not a priority right now.
Yeah, so I want to ask you about governance in a second. That's a very spicy topic in Cosmos. Every day we have new governance drama, but that's interesting. Yeah, and I think like eventually it's going to be, you know, I did a deep dive, not a deep dive, but like I made a video about Avalanche subnets versus parachains on Polkadot versus app chains in Cosmos, and I learned that they all just have different flavors and they all have market demand, right? And all have product market fit. And I guess in your case, that's also true, right? So I think the end game is you just have this network of ecosystems that eventually all have to somehow interoperate, right? I recall also, I think I saw in one presentation you gave that the end game ideally is that users shouldn't care, like if they're in Near, if they're in Solana, if they're in Cosmos, wherever they are. It should just be smooth. It should just work, right? It should be intuitive also.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So on this note, watch our presentation at we have a Near day at East Denver on March 2nd, and so we're going to be introducing some really cool stuff around that.
Is that live streamed or is that?
I'm sure there will be like stream or recording. Yeah. So
it's part of the East Denver conference or your own side event.
Okay. It's like at East Denver venue a day before East Denver.
Okay. Well, for developers to experience Near, you need to onboard developers, right? And I just opened up here the Electric Capital reports that came out in January. There's currently 23,000 monthly active developers all over crypto, which, to be honest, that's nothing. I think there's just in JavaScript alone, there's like 10 million or whatever. So
I think Google has like 200,000 people, right? So.
Wow. So how do you tackle that? Like, what's your strategy for Near? Do you host a bunch of hackathons around the world? How do you want to onboard, 200,000 devs into the Near ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we have been doing hackathons. We have actually a meta build, which is our like kind of premier hackathon that finished end of November last year. It was like 1 million prizes, like 3,000 participants. So we do that usually like twice a year. Then we do we did actually a hackathon at NearCon, right? So we do like in person. So we're doing East Denver as well. We're gonna have a lot of bounties. We're gonna have our DevRel team on board. And so with whatever we're releasing at East Denver, you will be able to build stuff and test it out. And so we're definitely doing that. We actually started a somewhat recent initiative. It's called Developer DAO. And it's related to our developer governance actually, but it's also we're using this kind of a gigs board as a way to facilitate finding what are the ideas and projects that people are ideas that people want, projects that people want to build, and then figuring out which are important for the ecosystem based on kind of upvotes and discussions, and then funding, providing funding for some of them, as well as just getting people excited to build really interesting things, right? And so I think a lot of the there's few tracks of developers, right? There's developers who come in who are just interested and curious, and they want to figure out what is possible with this technology. And I think very frequently we don't actually have a really good way to in Web3 broadly to give these developers something to play with. And so that's what we're trying to actually address is hey, you're coming in, you're interested in stuff. Well, here's some interesting ideas you can do. They're not a startup. You're not trying to build a business, right? They're just really cool thing you can tinker with, right? Then there is, hey, you already tinkered, or you came in and you're interested in building something like useful. Okay, here's the thing you can do, and you get paid for that. And finally, the final part is startups. Is like, hey, you want to do a startup, you're trying to build a business or solve a problem. And okay, well, here's all the documentation, here's the templates, here's examples, here's things to fork, and here's, support line, and like then accelerator, connection to VCs, and all the stuff, right? So there's like this three path, and like they kind of one converts into another and another, and obviously people come in the middle as well. And like that's how we think about the process, right? And so we are actually releasing more interesting things, especially around decentralized front ends and ability to really build fully decentralized apps. That also just opens up actually a lot broader what developers can do. Because I also think like the mental model has been that people need to come in and build for us smart contracts, right? For Cosmos, it's even more complex. You need to build a chain, right? And so there's very little like, can I come in and tinker a little bit opportunity, because it's actually pretty hard to, like, all in all, like even near smart contracts are actually really easy. It's still a very high activation to get to like a mainnet smart contract. And so what we have with decentralized front ends is ability to just like come in, you look at something, you're like, that's cool, I want this, but in different way. You can just click fork the front end, modify it a little bit in JavaScript, boom, launch. It's on mainnet, it's running, it's visible to everyone. You can post it on social, boom, it's already used, right? So the idea is like, how do we get faster iteration, something that's really usable, something that people can use right away, and then onboard more people through that, both developers, but also end users who they then share it with.
Yeah, I think the thing about Cosmos, like a lot of people also, I think, just think that Atom is Cosmos, right? But Cosmos is basically just a network of sovereign layer ones. And I think the fact that it's all sovereign, and as you mentioned, right, you have to have your own validator set to build an app chain. Obviously now an app chain can also be something like Juno, where you have CosmWasm, for example, and you can build smart contracts on that. But I think the fact that we have this app chain ecosystem is like, all of these projects have their own developer recruitment, right? They have their own events, their own hackathons, their own community, right? And I think that's like, Cosmos is more fragmented in that sense, but it's all kind of like connected through IBC. But I want to talk about IBC with you in a second, and interoperability. On one note, also, last week, actually, I made a video about the Cosmos Hub Atom, and I was wearing this here, which in my opinion is one of the best hoodies I ever got. I got this at the NearCon last year. People roasted me. Today, I'm actually wearing a Cosmos shirt when I'm talking about Near. So ultimate psyops here. But talk to me a little bit, because I'm also, part of the team at Cosmoverse, which is the NearCon equivalent, basically, of Cosmos. What role does NearCon play for you? You already mentioned like that's a path to onboard new developers. And what's the game plan for NearCon this year?
Yeah, so NearCon, it's a place to gather the ecosystem and community and builders, and kind of both promote what people building, inspire people for next year, and as well as have hackathon, have new people coming in as well. And we've done a lot actually of travel stipends to invite people, and kind of, I think there was like 120 countries people came from. And so really trying to bring in kind of a depth of the community versus, just people who can easily access it. And yeah, I mean, it's also like we invited, science fiction writers to talk about, we invited a coach to talk about how decentralized, in decentralized, how should we work together? So like kind of trying to bring like different aspects of the ecosystem as well, not just the developer part. But overall, yeah, I mean, obviously there's was a lot of projects presented, as you saw, and there was a hackathon going on in parallel. There was gaming kind of corner where people could play like near games. And so really trying to surface all of these aspects of the ecosystem. And so I'm really excited about the coming year. It's not fully finalized on the dates and location, but it's going to be coming out soon. So stay tuned.
Is it going to be in Lisbon again, or are you considering other places.
Stay tuned for the update. So.
Okay. Yeah. One of the cool things I really liked, I was actually I think it was the first one, 2021, right? Was you had a very cool kind of NFT gallery that was like its own space, and it was also like with like a maze. It was really cool. But yeah, looking forward to that. We'll definitely join this year if I'm around. Let's talk about shared security. Is that a thing on Near? You already mentioned, like, what I was originally thinking that would be a sidechain, for example, or a subnet equivalent, something like Aurora. It's actually just a smart contract. So how does shared security work on Near? Is there any plans? And like, do you have any thoughts on concepts like mesh security, where you have different chains provide security but also consume security at the same time?
So Near itself, you can think of it as shared security, or you can think of it as like enshrined rollups, or you can think of it as like a lot of individual chains which are like optimally packaged, right? Like that's the thing. Like it's all the same concepts, and like there's just a trade-off of how they're organized. And so Near is trying to organize them in such a way that, like, as a user and developer, you don't need to think about it, right? And so that's why, like, yes, it is all shared security, because like you don't need to think about security. Like it just works. Right. Yeah. Underneath, there's like a consensus layer, which is data availability. It's like, erasure codes everything to make sure that if any of single shard goes down, there's a way to recover all the data. Like there's, recomputation, there's like challenges coming and stuff like this, like all of those pieces, like all there. But like you don't need to think, you think from like as a conceptually, it still feels like one chain. And that's extremely important. And that's why I'm saying like Aurora has its own shard. It, some subset of validators are validating it, right? But it's like, they don't need to think about it. They just launch the smart contract and just like, cool, it works, and you get capacity they need. We actually do have a project called Octopus, which is a way to get security, source security from Near for other chains. And so the idea there, you can say like, hey, I want to run this new app chain. Here is my, right now, WebAssembly runtime. Give me some validators and some security, and I'll pay you the token I'm going to be using on this chain. And so they've been running. They have few app chains running. They were coming from a Polkadot world, so it was using Substrate framework, but they are actually working on Cosmos SDK support as well. And so that is an example of kind of sourcing security from the chain. And they also, I think there's like interesting projects in broader Web3, right? Like EigenLayer, for example, which are kind of reusing the existing staked security to secure other applications across the chain. So I definitely think it's an interesting principle, and we'll see a lot more of this on Near as well.
Yeah. Did you get to look into the concept of replicated security, or like interchain security that's coming to the Cosmos Hub, or?
Some of it, yeah. And I mean, it's definitely interesting, and kind of, it makes sense for Cosmos, because on one side, Cosmos, like the intersection of validators, is non-trivial between different app chains. But at the same time, yeah, like kind of linking all those things it makes sense. But yeah, I'm curious to see how it's going to be rolling out.
Me too, yeah. And it still has to go through governance. So let's see how that plays out. But I think it's coming out in the next couple of weeks. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. Well, as we talk about some of the things, and also dropped Cosmos here and there, a big thing obviously on the Cosmos side, and a big philosophy, is interoperability, right? So the idea that there's this internet of blockchains, and there's now IBC that connects all Cosmos chains, but now it's also going outside of Cosmos, right? There's IBC implementations planned on Polkadot, also potentially with Near, and eventually with Ethereum. So first of all, I wanna ask about your current landscape of interoperability. I know you have the Rainbow Bridge, which, as far as I know, is also built or modeled kind of on this light client architecture. So yeah, maybe first off, explain what Rainbow Bridge is, and then also your thoughts on IBC.
Yeah, so Rainbow Bridge was kind of, the project started in like October 2019 with the idea like, how do we bridge to Ethereum? And I mean, obviously coming from very similar idea that the only secure bridge is light client bridge. And the problem was Ethereum back then as a proof of work is extremely hard to build like an efficient light client. And so that's why like IBC actually never built a proof of work light client, right, for Ethereum support. And we actually ended up building it. And so Anton Bukov from 1inch built kind of a first version, and then the whole team productionized it. And so we actually had a fully light client bridge with Ethereum to Near, where Near light client was verified on Ethereum, and it was the only light client bridge in existence to Ethereum proof of work. Now, kind of this transition of proof of stake, right? It's easier, so there's more opportunity to do that. But it kind of generally the difference with IBC that Rainbow follows like a very simple architecture. It's a light client, so there's one smart contract that just a light client. And so the cool thing about this, you can do a lot of other stuff with light clients. So you can call that smart contract and say like, hey, what's a block? What was the block, a day ago, or what was this a block a day ago, or what was a transaction outcome at some point, etc. Then there's a prover. So prover allows you to prove specific things about the block, right? So it's not just transactions or token transfer, but you can check, for example, you can read out the state of another contract on Ethereum. So on Near, it's possible to say like, hey, how much this address has on Ethereum? And you can do it on Near directly without needing to call out into anything, right? Because of Rainbow architecture. And finally, there's so-called connectors. So connectors just end user applications, tokens, NFTs, this like check the balance. You can like chain link, like read the chain link state of Ethereum, etc. And so this architecture is like it's pretty simple, but it's like very extensible and allows to do a lot of things. And so that's Rainbow. It's been running. It's, been like at some point I think 2 billion kind of value on the bridge. I think it's still like 400 million right now, or over that. And obviously the problem is it's like you need to write light clients for every single chain you need to connect to, and the security of this is extremely important. So it's really hard to verify these things and do this. And so with IBC, the interesting thing is obviously it's standard. I do think it's a bit more complex than Rainbow, and like there are reasons for that. But it, obviously, like if everybody agrees on that, then everybody writes light clients in that form, and so it can connect. And like we actually have all the things on the Near side for IBC to connect to Near, and there's obviously Rust implementation of light client, Python, Solidity. Like there's many implementations of light client already, and we have like the proofs and etc. needed for IBC to work. So yeah, I'm excited for Cosmos ecosystem as people are developing IBC clients to connect to Near.
I mean, it sounds like IBC is coming to Near then, or
it's Near.
It's Near. I also wanted, as you explained the architecture of Rainbow, are they also some sort of like relayers that?
Yeah. So this is pretty much there's a relayer who need to send the blocks to each other, and then
it's very similar to how IBC works then. Yeah. Okay, but I think it would make a lot of sense, and I think it's really cool because IBC is obviously getting a lot of traction. It's been around now for 2 years in production. So yeah. Do you think there's like what is the game plan with Rainbow moving forward? Like, is it just kind of like this bidirectional bridge between Ethereum and Near, or do you also aim to like expand that to other ecosystems?
So earlier, like there was some ideas to expand, but I think at this point, because there is IBC and others, like probably gonna kind of create a more. I think like again, I think of experience, right? Like if the technology underneath is like secure and robust, then it's not a question of technology anymore. It's a question of user experience. And so I think the important piece is creating this like more uniform user experience. So when you use applications, you don't need to think as much on which chain they are. And I think that's really like if we're talking about interoperability going forward, that's at least like I'm more interested in that. Like how do we, you log in with MetaMask and you use Near app. You log in with Kepler and you use, Ethereum app. Like how we start doing these things.
People are already getting excited here. Is this the unofficial announcement today? we don't know, but it's near. I want to learn a little bit about the Near ecosystem. I said in the intro that there's nearly 100 million, according to DeFi Llama, 84 million TVL across a variety of DeFi, predominantly DeFi protocols. The biggest ones is Ref Finance, which is a DEX, then Metapool, we already talked about it, liquid staking, and Burrow, which is a lending protocol. So yeah, maybe talk a little bit about the landscape and also like the Near ecosystem, and also what do you think about sort of enterprise adoption? Like, is that something that you see Near also play a role in, or are you more focused on retail?
Yeah, so Near ecosystem, I mean, you just read obviously some of the DeFi projects, which is definitely not everything. Also, Aurora has a separate dashboard, so it has its own 75 million. So yeah, so I mean, obviously there's a lot of financial primitives that are needed and kind of been built. I did mention Orderly because I think it's a really interesting, but there's also 2 on-chain order book DEXs, Spin and Tonic, which been doing pretty well. And so kind of that's like I would say the foundational DeFi infra that then being used by other applications. And so the really interesting actual use cases are things like Sweatcoin, right? It's like move to earn type experience. It's actually a very like a traditional app that's been around for 7 years that just introduced blockchain, and they have 120 million installs. And so they actually brought like a ton of users into the space because these were not users who existed in crypto before. There's Play Ember, which is like a kind of casual game studio, which has like 4 or 5 million kind of monthly active users that they're also bringing over time to the ecosystem by introducing into these games crypto mechanics. And so like applications like that is what's really interesting, is like taking existing Web2 use cases or kind of with user bases and bringing them into Web3 by like starting to introduce. And this is where Near is extremely well positioned because of the usability, right? Because we actually make it really easy and kind of straightforward to build this experience for this Web2 application. So they don't need to rework everything to do this. And so that's been a big focus, is like, and this brings users, right? That's the most important. Like at the end, it's all cool. We build a lot of cool stuff, but then nobody uses it, right? That's not good. So like, how do we bring this user bases? On enterprise side, there's definitely, a bunch of things going on. And so we actually have a really interesting startup in the ecosystem called Calimero Network, which is a private shards. So this is the idea of running pretty much a shard of Near, but inside the enterprise or a company behind the firewall. And so you still have interlinked with the public chain. You kind of register there. You have the hashes of all your data is there, but the transactions and state is all sits within the firewall. But the cool thing, because it's interleaved, you can actually talk to other private shards, and smart contracts of Near and this private shard can talk to each other within whatever rules you set up. And so that kind of, and like wallets work exactly the same. So it kind of creates a feel of the same space, even though these smart contracts and this state and these transactions are hidden behind the firewall. So there's like kind of lots of tooling around to do some of these enterprise use cases. And so, we'll see some of the adoption coming in, probably like, I mean, maybe slowed down by last year's events, but still.
Yeah, I feel like organizations or enterprises, they're more interested when prices go up. So let's see. One last thing before I ask you about the blockchain and AI narrative. I guess the soul of any crypto project is the community, right? So what is the current state of the Near community, and how does governance work on Near?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I mentioned community is very kind of broad and decentralized. I think we have a lot of like East Asia support, a lot of Eastern Europe, and then Western Europe, US, and like we continue trying to grow presence in LATAM and Africa. We have,
Yeah.
and
there's Latinos in the chat.
Yeah.
There we go.
And so like we've been trying to set up these hubs. Oh yeah, awesome. And so the hubs, kind of the presences around the world, which kind of create this, like, crystallize the community, help, build projects, as well as educate, as well as, market, as well as organize events, like do all those things. And so, some of it is then ambassadors of all of the projects. Some of it like becomes their own thing. Some of them build their own projects. So like it kind of varies, but like we've been kind of creating this decentralized, right, presence as we decentralize in the organization itself. And we've spun out a bunch of companies outside of kind of the initial core team. And so like they all became kind of this organizations around the ecosystem that are focused on different aspects of the ecosystem. Like we have a gaming guild, right, which like they've worked with 100 gaming developers to build different. We have DeFi, Proximity is working with tons of DeFi projects. We have kind of eco funds that are funding companies. We have those hubs that are working with like enterprises or with startups. So like kind of the idea is like to create like a very vibrant and decentralized ecosystem. And now then the governance question comes in. It's like, okay, well, how do you like rowdy this up? And so we started this initiative called Near Digital Collective, which is, the idea was like, how do we wrap this into like some form of more formal decision making than just kind of shouting at each other on the forum. And so we have that work in progress. There's like first versions rolling out, and then it's kind of with idea of continuously iterating on this. So I'll, like, stay tuned for like first version of NDC is rolling out, and then but like it will follow with like more and more updates as well.
So as of right now, is there no kind of like on-chain governance framework that's in production, or?
Not yet. Yeah, it's like a combination. So right now the governance is combination of like individual pieces. Like we have a marketing DAO, which is on chain, like marketing, like they can fund marketing requests. We have developer DAO, which funds developer stuff. They also have developer governance. They have a protocol working group. They have with its own votes. We have and then like my belief is like having one big governance of token holders is not the right approach, right? Like this is something like you should only ask like as a final resort if like everybody disagreed with everyone, and like everybody, like then you go to that. But you should have like a lot of local governance kind of bodies that are specialized in their specific function. And so they focus there. They're experts. They know exactly what, they have potentially vision, or they like work, from input and community, and they drive that, right? So like we have protocol working group, right, which is like includes, 2 or 3 different companies. We have, as I said, marketing DAO, which includes like different people from the ecosystem, the marketing, like who can fund different aspects. So like that, and like we're trying to start more of these kind of smaller things, and then NDC will be kind of more of a oversight and like larger, like fund of fund funding function, right? Where it's like, okay, well, we allocate, $2 million for marketing DAO for next quarter, right? They done a great job, or they done poor job, we're gonna allocate only $500,000. We'll try to RFP another one to see maybe somebody will do better, right? So like kind of more macro decisions versus like, hey, should we do this, specific thing or not?
I'm very glad actually that you shared that, because I think in Cosmos, a lot of people are very, and I think rightfully also, but like very proud of the framework we have, right? Which is that you have this kind of like governance layer for the entire community, like literally every Atom holder, staker can vote, propose ideas, whether that's software upgrades or request funds from the treasury. But I really like, and I think that's also a big learning for us here, like this concept to have sub-DAOs for specific areas, right? And then you probably have experts that will decide on that lead the DAO, that are also qualified to assess certain ideas. I think that's urgently needed in Cosmos. But I still think like, having this layer, and that's why like the Cosmos community is so passionate and engaged, is because they actually can contribute some of the ideas. And I think there's trade-offs, right? Like you guys can probably move much faster. You can take decisions faster, which we can't. Sometimes it's a little bit slower, but it's interesting. And I think there's a lot of learnings that we can take from that.
Sure. Yeah.
Final question before we do 1 or 2 questions. I know we're almost out of time. with your background, I mentioned in the intro, 10 years of experience in machine learning. I think you said in one presentation, like you were teaching machines to code. So what are your thoughts on this whole narrative, blockchain and AI together? Like that's the end game. Like, do you actually think that could be the end game for Web3, or is that just a vaporware sort of narrative?
Well, so I think the narrative is right as usual. The problem is in details, right? That's it's like DeFi gonna eat the world. It's like yes, but how, right?
Yeah.
And like when, and so here's a few things, right? So Web3 is a coordination mechanism, like at the core. It's a coordination, it's identity, it's funding, it's like all of those pieces, right? Packaged in a really nice kind of composable way that you can build on top. And AI is a kind of something that needs coordination, because if you think of it, what you don't want is a single company that owns and controls like the tool that everybody uses, that influences how people think and how people write and how people interact. Like you just don't want any single company to be in control of that unilaterally. And you can think of this even now already, like the data that these models are being trained on is collected by this company, one or the other, it doesn't matter which one. And that company has inherent biases on what data and how they'll collect it. And so these biases will come out from these models. And so the most obvious thing of using Web3 for AI is to do crowdsourcing, to do data labeling, to pretty much connect people around the world who want to do work with the work that needs to be done to train these models. And so that's where we as Near started. And actually on Near, there's a project that's been running for almost 2 years now called NearCrowd that's been doing this. It's built by somebody in community. And so they've actually been employing like 1,000 to 2,000 people daily to collect data for this. And like there will be more stuff in this space coming out. The second one is right now, a lot of this research is done kind of behind closed doors, and then like paper comes out, but it's like a very still very exclusive path. So again, this is something where blockchain can create like incentives around doing this in the open, kind of collaborating more, sharing more, and then benefiting from these models together. And finally, the thing that everybody got excited about, and that's right now, is vaporware, which is compute. So compute is completely unrealistic right now because all of the current like capabilities for training really powerful models require almost a supercomputer setup, right? Actually, the connectivity between GPUs in these clusters is faster than connectivity between GPU and CPU right now. Like the bus is actually faster than the bus that goes to CPU. And so like it's very unlikely that in short to medium term, the compute any type of decentralized compute will match that. Now, you can still have resource management on top of kind of these clusters for people to, compete and, let's say like I'm willing to pay like this much and you're willing to pay this much, like who should be allocated right into a cluster. Like that can be done on chain. This can be done like more openly. Right now it's done like by negotiating with Amazon or with Microsoft or with Google. So there's like a lot of ways to coordinate AI research and AI work and AI usage. And we will need more and more like governance around AI usage going forward. But directly like training and inference right now is just not very usable.
Do you think, one question, do you think that eventually Chat GPT should or could run on its own blockchain at some point, or?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like right now, like it requires extremely different setup. That's like very like literally wired, cables that are like connected. Like the connectivity, like the wiring between two GPUs there is 800 gigabit per second.
Mm-hmm.
This is the CPU to GPU connectivity is like 200 something gigabit per second, right? Like this is a supercomputer setup, right? That's like very specialized. There's research on how to do like a more distributed compute and stuff like this, and like at some point something may come out, but again, right now this is not realistic. And so, but again, it's a bunch of stuff that's very much realistic and should be done.
Yeah, I think it's also a hot topic right now because Elon Musk also responded to this tweet where somebody said ChatGPT lists Trump and Elon Musk as controversial and worthy special treatment. Biden and Bezos not. So as you just said, right? Like this creates some biases, and if it's managed by a company, or I think ChatGPT is also not open source, right? It's entirely closed source. So yeah, wild stuff.
Well, and then the other thing to think about is this AI is actually allows to start exploiting a lot of the vulnerabilities in our like societal layer, like law, political, etc. And so this is where we actually need to use Web3, like to fix our societal layer. Like in US, especially, people in like West, people kind of used to like the system is a little bit broken, but it's like not broken enough to deal with it. You know, if you're coming from like Eastern Europe or Africa, you know, system is like mostly broken. But the like AI will actually exploit this, like allows to exploit this at the scale, right? You can like DDoS a legal system, like a court with a lot of lawsuits that like look like they're reasonable lawsuits, although they're completely bullshit, right? Right. You can like create a fake company and raise money for it. You can create like a fake candidate that, you know, will talk to everyone in the city and convince them to vote for them, right? Like you can start doing these things which are like actually attacking kind of some of the societal fabric. And like the way to fix this is to actually start leveraging more and more Web3 technology, identity, you know, provenance, kind of authentication, all this stuff.
Yeah, makes sense. Otherwise, the end game for humanity is AI. But let's see. Let's go through some comments. There's a lot of excitement around getting IBC on Near. Near has great tech, says Mike. Let's see. There, I also saw like there was actually a job application. Hey Leo, I've been working in sales for past 7 years in Web2. Been looking for business development sales positions at Near. Can I send you my CV, my resume on Twitter? Do you currently look for BD people or?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can send, and I can send it over to our HR team.
There you go. Just make sure you give credit to this chat if you guys hire them. Then there's also another question. I should ask you if you would be nominated to the Cosmos Hub CEO. Would you want to? I don't even think anybody wants to take that role. That's a very tough one.
I definitely say like if I cannot run anything, I would prefer that. But you know,
yeah.
Somehow in decentralized world, you still need some people who actually, you know, leading things. So
let me see what else we have. Near and IBC. I'm gonna take over. I don't see it. Like, if you see any questions, please let me know. But I think a lot of this we also talked about, so it should be addressed. A lot of Latinos here in the chat. There we go. Yeah, I think you guys have a strong presence there. When we were in Colombia for Cosmos, there were actually quite a couple of people from the Near ecosystem. I think that's it. Yeah. Got an invitation to LATAM. I'm always happy to get back to LATAM. I love Latin America. But man, this was really cool. Maybe we can do this again in the future, or you know, get someone on to debate some of the things, some of the architectural designs. If you ever wanted to do that, just let me know. Thank you everybody in the chat for your input, and I'll see you in the next one, man. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Cheers.